Ready?
Another day, another woman who loves Adam Brody. So, this is a preview. So, today I'm showing you my movie and TV show collection. I feel like you guys have enjoyed my collection videos, so I wanted to give you another. I feel like this is very similar to my bookshelf in that there's a lot of nostalgia here, a lot of childhood here, but not necessarily the entire representation of my entire lot loves within the media. There's a lot that's not here. I do feel like my collection is very cozy and imaginative, and I feel like that sums up my love of visual media. I love coziness. I love the feeling of getting to unwind after a long day, an exhausting week, and feeling either seen, understood, or just feeling the love of stories. I'm definitely more of a movie watcher than a TV show watcher. I don't know what it is. I have to really, really, really love a show to want to watch the entire thing, let alone watch it regularly. And so I feel like I've had a lot of partially watched shows in my lifetime and not too many completed shows because I don't know. I have to really love the characters if I'm watching an entire show. So the characters make or break it for me. Especially because by and large I tend to watch older shows and they're much longer. They're a much bigger time commitment than newer shows. Yeah. So how about we start with the shows? I literally just wanted all of my favorite shows, which are 3 shows, represented. And so that's why I have what I have. Because if I didn't have at least one season of each of these on my shelves, I feel like you wouldn't know me as a TV watcher. So the first one is probably still the most beloved show of all of the shows that I love, and that is Gilmore Girls. And my favorite thing about my love for Gilmore Girls is I literally was a Gilmore Girl because my dorm was called Gilmore, so we all took pride in that. I also had a very fun experience watching Gilmore Girls for the first time because I was Rory's age and I watched shows so slowly. I basically was her age throughout every season. Not exactly, but like for the majority of the time watching the show, we were growing up at the same time, so that very made it very relatable to watch and to hold on to. And I also remember watching Rory start college before I did, and it made this very daunting new thing I'd never done before feel less daunting. So I really appreciated that. Gilmore Girls is very well known, but if you don't know, it's about Lorelai, the mother, and her daughter, also Lorelai, but her nickname is Rory. And Lorelai is a single mom raising Rory. They live in a small town, and it's very much like a small town family show. They have kind of an estranged relationship with Lorelai's parents because she was kind of the rebel only child that they had. And so the entirety of the show also ends up following Emily Gilmore, Lorelai's mom, and how all 3 of the Gilmore girls grow and evolve and how their relationships grow and evolve as well. And it's really cool to see because they all have such different character arcs, but they're all so lovely. So it has a lot to do with womanhood, girlhood, figuring out relationships. There's plenty of romantic relationships both Rory and Lorelai are figuring out. And one of the coolest parts of the show, as I've watched it multiple times now, is that a lot of times in each episode, Lorelai and Rory's story arcs are either mirroring each other, like the same things are happening for them in different ways at the same time, or they're having like opposing story arcs. And it always says something about both of the characters every episode. So I really like that. The character development is done really well. And I think what ultimately made me emotional finishing the show, there's 7 seasons in the original series, was by the end, you just feel like you genuinely grew up with them, and of course, again, biased for me because I literally did through college with Rory. And just getting to see them overcome so many things. I'm definitely more, literally all three of these shows are dramas. I am more of a drama watcher than sitcom watcher, not because I don't love humor, because I do. Also, these are, Gilmore Girls is really funny, but there are a lot of niche references. Everyone doesn't always necessarily know, so that's a thing. But what I like about dramas, maybe also because they tend to be longer episodes, is I really feel like I know the characters better and deeper versus a sitcom. Like, I have watched the entirety of Friends and I did enjoy it, but it doesn't hold the same affinity in my mind because it's mostly just situational random things the characters are going through, whereas you're actually like watching their lives in dramas most of the time as you would experience your own life or experience a friend's life or a family member's life. So I feel like the characters in dramas tend to just be a lot deeper and you get to see them a lot more intimately and even understand their internal life a little bit, where you can't do that in sitcoms. So I think naturally, as someone who loves novels, it makes sense. I enjoy dramas where I get to just see more full-fledged characters deal with a lot of different kinds of scenarios. Some very over the top and not very realistic, but also sometimes selfishly it's nice to watch very melodramatic things too, because I'm like, oh, I'm glad my life's not that unpredictable or dramatic. Sometimes dramas give me a much needed optimistic perspective on my own life as well. So don't downplay the positive effects of comparing to melodrama. The second show that I fell in love with in college because of my sister, actually both of these I found through my sister, which I'm very grateful for. The second one is One Tree Hill, which is also an early 2000s drama. This is season 2. Actually, this is not even mine. This was my sister's, and I took it because I was like, I need to have at least one of these on my shelf. One Tree Hill is about a group of teens going through high school, but then there's a time jump in like season 5, and then they're adults. So it covers a even longer span of time than Gilmore Girls does, and I think that makes it even easier for me to be connected with these characters. Because out of all three of these shows, these are the characters I've seen go through the most amount of life. So that makes it really special. And also, this and the third show both have the commonality of having really good music, and I think that's also a reason why I love it. Very biased, but if a show doesn't have good music, it's going down in rating naturally. One Tree Hill has Gavin DeGraw as the lead singer of the title song, I Don't Want to Be. I think everyone knows that song, even if you didn't watch One Tree Hill. And they also had tons of other up and coming artists that are now huge. They had Switchfoot multiple times on their soundtrack. They had Fall Out Boy, who's obviously huge. So, and then they had literal performances in the show throughout as well. Gavin DeGraw did perform at one point in one of the episodes. Part of the show is Peyton, my icon, one of my alter egos, owns a lounge, like a music and bar lounge. And so she gets live acts to come in. And so they literally had actual bands come in and play in some of the episodes. So again, very music centric. And it's actually literature centric too. Lucas Scott, one of the other main characters, ends up writing a book. So my two favorite art forms are represented throughout this show. But for those of you who haven't seen One Tree Hill, it's about two brothers who are kind of from different sides of town, kind of that little bit of classism, where Lucas is from a little more of the lower class, whereas Nathan is kind of the spoiled kid that gets everything that he wants. And we see them forge a relationship from being pretty estranged. So Lucas and Nathan share a father, Dan Scott, who's like one of the most evil characters ever, especially in a drama, in something that's not like fantasy. And so he's both of their fathers, but they have different mothers. Anyway, they both played basketball. So in high school, all of these characters essentially come together through basketball, through relationships with one another. So Haley and Lucas have been best friends forever. And then I feel like I can't say too much. Basically, romantic relationships happen between all of the characters, but I'm not going to say who with who. But that's not the main plot either. It's kind of just all over the place because it's a drama. I feel like it's a little less linear than Gilmore Girls in its plot, but basically it's very coming of age. You're watching all of them find themselves and figure out what's important to them and unravel like the narratives their parents are working through versus like what they actually believe and how they want to navigate their relationships despite or regardless how their parents navigate their relationships. So a lot of times there's parallels between, kind of similar to Gilmore Girls, where you're watching all the kids interacting and then you're watching the kids interacting with their parents and then you're watching all the parents interacting without the kids around. And there's some huge events that happen that change different relationships between kids and parents throughout the series. But it's really just a show where you have to love the characters because you're going to watch them through their childhood and through their adulthood. So, yes, Peyton is by far my favorite character. I relate to her the most. I feel like we have the most core wounds in common that we've had to work through and heal from, especially this idea that everyone leaves and abandonment wounds. Very relatable for me. And Brooke probably has the largest redemption arc of seeing her character change and evolve. And I think Sophia, her actress, definitely put a lot of her passion in there herself to help craft Brooke as a character. And I love Brooke's character journey. Like, I am very, very proud of Brooke Davis. And they actually all have fantastic character arcs. I just remember the huge time jump in, I'm pretty sure it was season 5, was very jarring at first, but I got used to it and I ended up loving it also. So it definitely takes a little bit to transition because you think, oh, we're just naturally going to follow them into college, and then you skip over college. Um, but it actually worked really well, and I think especially given the actors' ages, I think it transferred over very well, and I think it also helped them retain the audience that they had and how fast they were growing up as well. So it's quite a bit melodramatic in especially the first season as they kind of trial and error and try to figure out, the direction of the show as a whole. But definitely, I think at the end of season 2, you can really decide if you're in for the long haul or not. Lastly, but certainly not least, most people know my man Adam Brody now from Nobody Wants This, but I know and love him the most. Or you know him as Dave from Gilmore Girls. But I know and love him the most from the OC, and clearly this means a lot to me because I specifically got all 4 seasons. Yeah, I found them thrifting, and then my sister found like 1 or 2 I didn't have thrifting as well, so I got them all for only like a couple dollars. Um, I still have to watch all the extra content on these, which I absolutely want to. This show is quite the roller coaster. It's like kind of divergent in that you'll either love or hate the way that 3 and 4 crumbled. I was wrecked. I was very unwell, but then I literally went through the stages of grief But then I ended up realizing I accepted it at the end, and it needed to be what it was. And yes, and yes, it would not be what I had written if I was the writer. But yeah, the OC is probably the least known of these three, but is still very well known. Also, early 2000s show. Also, fantastic music, including The Killers, who's iconic. There's like the most amount of indie rock on here, which is like my favorite music. So I would definitely say, in terms of, there's really no comparison, but between the OC and One Tree Hill, they both have like all of the music that I've ever loved in the 2000s, which gives me a lot of coziness and nostalgia. Um, the OC also, maybe this is why I'm biased, because I love morality. I feel like the show is definitely has the most morality of these three shows and how it's crafted, and the character dynamics and everything. So the OC is starring our man Ryan, and he is like down the beaten track kid who's gotten into a lot of legal trouble and is basically forced to have to turn his life around, and he needs help. And his parents are pretty much absent. So he gets himself into huge trouble in the very first episode and meets Sandy, which some of you might know from other like medical shows. I forget which exactly, but my friend who loves medical shows knew him right away. Um, and basically, he decides to be Ryan's lawyer and to really believe in him, believe in his ability to turn his life around despite his background and growing up as a kid with bad parents. So Sandy and his family, his wife, and Seth, my alter ego, hence why I got this sweater. The three of them decide that they want to take in Ryan into their home. And basically they live in Orange County, hence the title of the show. And it's about a lot of the like also a bit of classism there. Ryan obviously comes from complete poverty and then comes into this family with a lot of money. So working through classism dynamics, coming of age as well, trying to figure out how to turn his life around. And then obviously you have a little bit of romance and relationships coming into play. These are some of the other parents and a friend from school. And yeah, um, it's very much a show about redemption. And if you know anything about any of my other videos and the things that I love, this should be no surprise that my favorite of these shows is the story that centers on redemption the most. And Ryan truly does have the greatest character growth, and so I really like how on to Mike too, because that one died. My final comments on the OC were just that I really appreciate how in One Tree Hill I get a lot of character redemption for the female characters, and then in the OC I get a lot of character redemption for the male characters. I only watched the OC in full once throughout the past couple years, so definitely the most recent watch of the three, but I'm pretty sure season 2 was my favorite. And then if you're going to get into it again, you're going to get wrecked in the second half, so be emotionally prepared for that. Only do it if you can handle it. And so you might hate it or you might love it, and the divisiveness really makes it. But I feel like most people at least love seasons 1 and 2. So at least for seasons 1 and 2, I would say it's worth it. And especially in One Tree Hill and the OC, because they're much more teen focused, first and foremost. They do cover a lot of good social awareness topics, and I love how They cover a lot of different kinds of mental illness throughout the shows as well. So that's probably also why I really, really love the shows, because they're not just melodrama, though they definitely can be at times, don't get me wrong. But they can also be so much about genuine, real world, everyday issues that we have to constantly grapple with and figure out how to work through. The reason why I say Seth is my alter ego is basically because he loves indie rock music. He's super nerdy and makes being nerdy cool, okay, instead of being popular. And he's super witty and always has funny comebacks. So I feel like we have the same humor, we have the same love of art, we have the same amount of obsession and passion for a lot of things. And even more than Peyton Sawyer and Seth Cohen together are me. But I feel like Seth overall, it's even like his mannerisms. I feel like um, I've never seen myself more in a character, and I've never rooted for a character more, knowing that they're so much like myself. And so, in a way, I was rooting for Seth throughout the show just because I realized, oh, I have worked through my low self esteem, and I'm rooting for myself now. So personally, it's just a really cool experience to really come to completion in my self esteem journey and see that emphasized through my love of my alter ego. Okay, so let's get into the movies. So starting over here, starting with my series. The first series, which I really, really want to rewatch, especially because today was the first snow, is Narnia. So the first one is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. These are based on C.S. Lewis books. So this is, in publication order, this is book number 2 in the Narnia series. Prince Caspian is book number 4 in the series. And The Voyage of the Dawn Treader is book number 5 in the series. And these 3 follow the story of the Pevensey siblings, Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy. They're exploring the house one day, playing hide and seek, and Lucy finds this wardrobe, and she goes to hide in the wardrobe for their game. And in the back of the wardrobe, there's actually no back. It's a whole other world. It's Narnia. And of course, I've read the entire series, so like I know how Narnia was created in the first book, which you don't get to see. It's basically a symbolism story for the crucifixion of Jesus. A lot of his stories had symbolism of biblical stories. So I also would love to rewatch to really glean as much of the symbolism as I can, because that's what I do on my 21 Pilots podcast. But there's a lot of snow, especially in this one, so that's also why I really, really want to watch this. I'll probably watch it this week at some point. Yeah, so all 4 children discover Narnia after Lucy does, and it's like a classic good versus evil tale. I feel like most people probably know it already, but anyway, it continues on in Prince Caspian. The 4 children get called back because the Narnians need their help because of Prince Caspian, played by the one and only Ben Barnes. And yes, a lot more good versus evil happens. And I just love all the battle sequences in Narnia. They do a really good job. Prince Caspian was always my favorite growing up. And then the one I've only watched a couple times that was made later on was The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And this one, the children are much older, so it's actually just Lucy and Edmund. They go and visit Eustace, their cousin, and he discovers that his portrait in his room has the ability to transport them to Narnia. So they accidentally kind of fall into Narnia through the portrait. But it ends up being a coming of age discovery story that Eustace needs, and Lucy and Edmund get to go along with him for the ride. So, yes, so these three follow the Pevensies. They're, I guess they're alluded to in book three, but book three in the series is not actually about any of the four of them. And then 6 and 7 continue on with Eustace and the Pevensies return. No spoilers though. And book number 1 is just like the making of Narnia, basically. So none of them are alive at that point. It's basically a prequel. And then the next series probably aged the best because these are some of my all-time favorite books. And that is the Hunger Games series. So you have the Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and then Mockingjay. They split into 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. Me and my friends started rewatching these. We still have to rewatch the double feature of Mockingjay, but we're rewatching them for Haymitch especially, and it has been heartbreaking. So I'm not looking forward to Mockingjay for Haymitch's sake, but I'm also loving the Haymitch additional analysis now that his book is out. And also we have like a year until that movie comes out. It's gonna wreck me. It's definitely my favorite book. What can I say about the Hunger Games that you haven't heard already? I've said this before when I talk about Suzanne Collins, but she does such a good job of desensitizing us to how saturated we are in violence these days, especially with the internet and media outlets. These movies are so important. The books are so important. Jennifer Lawrence does a fantastic job. Josh Hutcherson does a fantastic job. Woody Harrelson does a fantastic job. All the other actors do as well. And of course, it's not as comprehensive as the books, because how can you be when you're making a movie that's way shorter than a book length? But they still definitely capture the essence of the stories. And if you haven't read them, these are just so culturally important. I just can't emphasize it enough. This is something I think should be a modern classic. It just ages so well with the cultural problems that we have. And probably don't have to say much about the next series, but it is Harry Potter. So of course I love these movies. The first one is so old that we only ever had a VHS, so I don't have that one. I should probably invest in a DVD of it at some point. But yeah, so I don't have the Sorcerer's Stone, but we have number 2, The Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, The Goblet of Fire, The Order of the Phoenix, The Half-Blood Prince, Deathly Hallows Part 1, Deathly Hallows Part 2, and then we have the prequels, because I just love a collection, obviously. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, The Crimes of Grindelwald, and The Secrets of Dumbledore. There you go. If you somehow missed the entire Harry Potter craze, which no shame, some people genuinely did, it is about a boy called Harry who grows up in an abusive household and is just kind of an oddball and doesn't fit in and realizes he's a wizard. His parents died when he was a baby, so he never knew them, and they died at the hands of the most evil wizard of all time, Voldemort. And it is a coming-of-age story where Harry goes to the wizarding school, grows up in the school, makes friends, builds relationships, and also figures out his uniqueness in the world where all wizards have died from the killing curse except him for some reason. And there is a reason for that. It's a huge plot twist. It is such a good series, such a timeless series that has remained so popular, I think, because it does such a good job of starting with the magic and the innocence of childhood, and then transitioning into the ruin of innocence through pain, through adulthood, etc., through insert whatever ruined your innocence, and really takes you on that journey and literally takes you into coming of age experience where you have to accept all of the roller coaster that life has to offer, and that you're really just having to autonomously work through all of that. But it holds your hand so gently and does a really good job. Um, if you are not all that interested in Harry Potter, or just like don't want to invest in all of these, because they are a lot, honestly, I think you can just watch Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them as a standalone movie. You don't even have to watch the other two. I think this is a fantastic movie. If you just want fantasy and like the depths of being in a fantasy world, this is such a good movie. And it's about all adults. So if you're just not really feeling the coming of age vibes, this is a much more mature adult iteration of still coming to see and know how the magical world operates. In this case, it's the 1920s. So quite a bit before Harry's journey. But you can see a lot of the roots behind how the Wizarding World came to be what it was. And it's a really good fantasy mystery story as well. Like, there's a lot of bad things happening, but you don't know why and you don't know who's behind them. And so you're trying to figure out what's going on, as well as just experiencing the comfort and coziness of fantasy. So, really, really good. The characters are really, really easy to love. And Newt Scamander is the main character. He becomes the author of this book in the Harry Potter universe. And so basically, he's a magizoologist and loves animals. And this story actually also has a lot to do with environmental causes and everything to do with the environment. So if that is also a passion of yours and you want to see it represented in a fantastical way, this does a really good job. So now we have the final few movies that are parts of series. I don't have the full collections of some of these here, but yes, the first one is probably the one I dislike the most, but also is nostalgic, so I have them, and that is Divergent. Oh, that's Insurgent. Divergent is based on the first book, and Insurgent is the second book. I actually rewatched these for the first time like 2 years ago. They were entertaining as movies. I'm still scared to reread them because I'm scared they're genuinely not going to be good books. The movies are quite a bit different, especially Insurgent, the second one, and overall compared to the other series. Like, these are definitely the poorest adaptation of them all to begin with. But then also the story is not nearly as strong as the other ones. This is a dystopia world that's set in Chicago, Illinois, and there's basically 5 factions that you get sorted into when you turn 16, and it's based on kind of your strengths, your personal priorities, and characteristics of your personality, basically. And so the premise is that Triss, the main character, is divergent. She doesn't fit just one, and that basically means she's a mutation that was not supposed to happen. And so the government is trying to extinguish the people who are divergent. And you kind of discover like why they're such a threat. You know, dystopia is a sect of science fiction, so there is very real like science technological reasons behind why the plot is what it is, and you're kind of discovering that as you go. But this also kind of crumbled as a franchise and didn't exactly pan out because a lot of people hate the way this series ended. So yeah, so it didn't even get a movie for the last one. I think it was just like a TV series or something. And I didn't even watch it because the second one was already like a really poor adaptation anyway. But if you just want like dystopia 2010s vibes, I mean, they are entertaining for that. Another iconic series from childhood, but one I don't have the entirety of, which is kind of sad, and that is Pirates of the Caribbean. So the two I currently have on my shelf, my family does have a couple of the others, but the ones I have are Curse of the Black Pearl, which is the first one, and On Stranger Tides, which is the fourth one. Yeah, really random mix. I think there's technically 5 or there's 6. But really, there was the original trilogy, and then they just started adding on at least 2 other movies, if not 3. I don't remember. I haven't watched this in so long. I watched this like once, but yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean is also very fantastical. And for being just a movie franchise, it was really, really well done. Like I haven't watched them in forever, and so maybe the script is like not the best, but like they're very entertaining movies. It was a very entertaining franchise. And personally as a kid, I really liked the fantasy vibes, and I feel like no one does anything like this anymore. Like everything is either based on something, no one's this like creative without a source text. And then these were just iconic growing up. Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants and the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants 2, which is very much a girlhood coming of age story about 4 friends who share a pair of jeans because they find out they can all fit in them. And so they use the jeans as a way to connect with one another despite being in different places throughout their summer, multiple summers. And so they write letters to each other and send along the pair of pants to cultivate memories while wearing the pants. And a lot of things happen relationally, socially, and it's about sisterhood, it's about friendship, but it's also about a lot of different emotions. And again, that's what coming of age is like, working through grief and working through some of those heavy emotions you've never experienced before, heartbreak and love. And it just handles all those emotions really well and was a joy to grow up with, and is, again, just a nostalgic comfort. Then one of my favorite kid stories growing up was always Peter Pan. So I have my little Peter Pan adjacent section on my collection. The first one is the 2003 Peter Pan. Everyone was in love with Jeremy Sumter, and I was no exception. So this also makes me weirdly emotional when I watch it. The music is also fabulous. But I haven't watched it in years, but I remember the last time it actually made me emotional. Something about it is so related to innocence of childhood for me that it just like gets me right in the heart. I can't explain what it is other than the story has always been pivotal to my childhood. And then this came out in 2015. This was just a different iteration of the Peter Pan story altogether, and that was Pan. This one was British, I believe. Yeah, Warner Brothers. And it has Hugh Jackman randomly. Basically, it says, Peter is a rebellious 12-year-old who has lived his whole life in a bleak London orphanage. One night, Peter is whisked away to Neverland, where he finds incredible adventures while trying to uncover the secret of his mother. Along with warrior Tiger Lily and new friend James Hook, Peter must defeat the ruthless pirate Blackbeard to save Neverland and discover his true destiny. I watched Hook growing up, but I really don't remember it at all. But I feel like this has a little more of a Hook flavor mixed with Peter Pan. I really loved how this was so like colorful towards the fantasy. That's something I've always related to Peter Pan specifically, is just like vibrancy in the magic itself. And this movie depicts that very, very well. It's very fantastical. It's very whimsical as well. And I just found it pleasantly surprising. I didn't know what to expect from it, and it was completely different from the original Peter Pan story, but it was still so magical. It's something about the feeling of magic that anything related to this story gives me that is so pure in its curiosity and creativity. And yeah. And then this is Finding Neverland, and this stars Johnny Depp and Kate Winslet. And this is based on the creator of Peter Pan and how Peter Pan came to be with J.M. Barrie. Basically, it's about like how James Barrie found the character inspirations and where he pulled the story from, but it's still like fictional. It has a lot to do with grief and love and family and innocence. It's very heartbreaking, but in a very beautiful way. And you don't have to even like Peter Pan to enjoy this story. The story is entirely its own, and the actors, of course, just do a fantastic job to really make the story come alive. What's cool about this is it's not fantasy, it's just the story behind creating the story and living life. And so it shows a lot of the fantasy and the whimsy in real life. And it's a lot more tangible in that way, but still fantastical and whimsical in the way that I love Peter Pan to be. Then I have a ton of kids' movies. So, in no particular order, my DreamWorks movies are Over the Hedge, iconic. Monsters vs. Aliens. This one, me and my brother randomly found when I was in like middle or high school, and we were dying laughing the entire time. So this is like peak teenage humor, and I love it. And I would love to show my nephew this because I feel like he would think it's hilarious. And Flushed Away, which I actually did watch last year, or even this past February maybe, with one of my good friends. It's literally toilet humor. So these are all silly, goofy, and fun. And I feel like they're all childhood staples, so I don't really need to talk about them. But if you don't know what they're about, if you like DreamWorks, if you like a Shrek moment, you're gonna want to watch these. The next group are my Disney movies. So we have my favorite Disney Channel original, Camp Rock. Of course, I was in love with the Jonas Brothers and fell in love with Demi Lovato's music because of this. If you don't know Camp Rock, I don't know what to tell you. A lot of these kids' movies are so well known. I'm not really going to go into detail, but you can look it up. Up, Disney Pixar, but such a beautiful, heart-wrenching, wholesome story that I would love to watch soon, but I also know like how emotional the beginning is, and I don't know if I'm ready for that right now. Ratatouille. Remember when we made a TikTok musical? The Little Mermaid 2, Return to the Sea. I love singing the Tiny Tip and Daring Dash song. I feel like I need to watch this again just to sing that song. Maybe my favorite song in a Disney sequel ever. Oh, this is one of my all-time favorite Disney movies, Big Hero 6. Baymax. I love Hero. I love Baymax. I love Fred. I love Tadashi. And I'm so shocked and upset that they never made a sequel movie. They did make a show, and I watched a good chunk of the show. But still, can we please have a sequel? And then one of my other favorite fantasy movies growing up, similar to Peter Pan, was Mary Poppins. And so Mary Poppins I only have ever had on VHS, but I do have Mary Poppins Returns on DVD. And this was me and my aunt's favorite, and so we went and saw this in theaters together when it came out. It was very special and wonderful and just as magical and whimsical as the original, which is why I loved it so much. Then we have miscellaneous kids movies. So we have The Little Rascals, which this is definitely a family movie. This is not just like my movie. Um, but this was iconic growing up. Um, Little Rascals was a show as well. So stars Alfalfa, and then we have Darla and all the other kids, and of course their dog. What was his name? Petey. Petey the dog. And this is just a super cute movie about these kids and all of their shenanigans. This is an iconic movie. Lemony Snicket, A Series of Unfortunate Events. This is books 1 through 3, and obviously it's an incomplete adaptation of the entire series, but it's so nostalgic. And Jim Carrey does such a good job as Count Olaf, and the music is so good as well. There's also a theme. My favorite childhood films also had really good music. A lot of them had the same composers too. I have multiple video games of A Series of Unfortunate Events as well. It was just something that I really latched onto in elementary school, along with Harry Potter as my other favorite series. This one is so good because it's bad. It's one of me and my friends' favorite movies to watch together because it's so laughable that the filmmaking was so silly, and that is Hoot. It is based on the book. But I mean, iconic cast of characters. You have Logan Lerman, Cody Lindley, and Brie Larson. And they're all really small. The opening scene is a really poorly done like CGI backdrop with an owl like flying into the screen, and you're like, here we go. um, it's just kind of a hysterical, ludicrous plot line altogether, I feel. But they're acting so good and they take it so seriously, but it's just, I don't know, it's just super silly but super fun. But it's kind of one of those, you're probably not going to think it's entertaining unless you grew up with it. I don't know, but Jimmy Buffett does the entire soundtrack as well, and that's just pretty iconic. And then this is my favorite fantasy movie, I think, and it gets the Peter Pan magic so well, but also has like even more well-aged themes behind it, for me anyway, and that is Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. And Dustin Hoffman and Natalie Portman bounced off each other so well. Their acting makes it. The toy store itself makes it. And again, this is an original. This is an original movie. I love an original movie. They're so rare these days, which upsets me, but I love them. And I'm sure I'll find more. I have a huge to watch list going, but of the few original movies I feel like I've seen in my lifetime, I've always really, really loved them. And this did original fantasy so well. How magic is has so much to do with your belief in it. It's just so fun. Okay, and then the rest of the shelf is young adult slash music. The two music are One Direction. So we have Up All Night, the live tour from their very first tour and their first album. Look at how little. And then One Direction, This Is Us, the movie that was actually in theaters. I watched these last year after Liam's passing, and it was so endearing. This Is Us was pretty emotional post Liam's passing, just to see how they're so young, they're teenagers, right? And they all experienced and interpreted fame so differently, um, because it's going to hit you differently as a different person with different life experiences. And yeah, it's just their story is crazy and really not something anyone should have to go through, but they did. And yeah, no one but them really understands what that's like, and it's makes it all the more heartbreaking that one of them is gone. And then we have the young adult slash teen movies. So Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Again, Logan Lerman. This is based on Rick Riordan's series. This is just the first book. It's not a super faithful adaptation, but I find it to be a very entertaining and fun movie experience. So I still love it as a movie. Soul Surfer, the fictional movie story of Bethany Hamilton's story and how she lost her arm to a shark, but had a ton of resilience and persevering with her faith, with her relationships, and with surfing, even after that happened and fear tried to take over her life. So it was a really cool representation of her life and her faith journey. This was probably uh, my favorite romance that I know is like not good, but it's still cozy to me because of what it was in my life in high school, and that is Beastly with Vanessa Hudgens and Alex Pettyfer. Has he even done much else? I don't know. But I also read the book. I loved this movie. This is another one where I feel like I rewatched it like I don't know when actually now, like a handful of years ago at least. And I feel like I also cried and I like didn't expect to, but it also hit some sort of nerve in me. And now I want to rewatch it again. I just remember the way it wrapped up and the way they processed through romance and love. I found so beautiful and poignant, and I feel like it the sentiments of where the characters land, I feel like aged better than I expected them to the last time I rewatched it. So I would be curious to rewatch this again. It's pretty corny, but I feel like it also has glimpses of moments where it's genuinely real in its depth too, in ways that you might not expect. Then we have another book adaptation, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Can you tell I love Logan Lerman movies, clearly. And Emma Watson and Ezra Miller also did a fantastic job. I feel like this is I mean, it has to be a fantastic adaptation because Steven Chbosky directed it. So both the book and the movie are fantastic, and has entirely the essence of the book. So whether you prefer reading or watching, they're both really good and deal with really important and deep mental health topics that I didn't fully understand when I first watched it in high school because I didn't have a ton of psychology knowledge, but yeah, deals with some huge trauma and wounds that the target audience couldn't even wrap their brains around at the time. So does a really good job. It is a bit dark though, especially because we're looking through Charlie, the main character's eyes. So just know that if you're gonna watch it, there's some trauma being addressed and worked through. Then we have the corniest Christian rom-com ever, but that of course I'm a sucker for, and that is A Walk to Remember. Early 2000s music, again, the equivalent of what I love in my shows in one movie in terms of music. It's super melodramatic. This is definitely like the most melodramatic, even more so than Beastly, I would say. Really, really corny, even some slightly cringy moments, but the nostalgia for me is entirely there. This is definitely where my unhealthy rescuer complex came from towards men, 100%. And then the one and only Mean Girls, period. It's dark outside now. We're down to the last few sections. We have musicals, and then we have adult slash, because these are all adult, I purchased them in adulthood, and they are all like my all-time favorite movies. So here we are. I also love all of these musicals, and I would say these are also everything here and out is basically an all-time favorite. For musicals, I'm going to start with this one because a lot of you already know this is an all-time favorite of mine through books, and that is Les Miserables. It's a musical, it's a novel, it's a movie. A lot of people don't like Russell Crowe's singing, but I think the movie is fantastic. I really do. And most of you probably do not want to read a 1,200-page book, so watch the movie. Watch the movie. It's about redemption, it's about romance, it's about war, mental health, everything in between. It's about life, period, all kinds of people. So there's kind of no one not in the target audience for this story, in my opinion. I feel like a lot of people make fun of this musical, but I really love it. Okay, so that is Dear Evan Hansen. I mean, I kind of have to because I love anything about mental health. This has to do with a boy, Evan, um, and it is a teen high school story. Basically, he breaks his arm one summer falling out of a tree, and then has to work through similar to Mean Girls, similar to a lot of the cliche stories, Camp Rock even, of trying to convince everyone of something that's not actually true, and then getting trapped in the fact that he lied, and then having to work through that. So, kind of a well-known cliche, but in a new angle from a mental health point of view. So it has a lot of depth in terms of emotions and mental health, and that's why I love it, because it's a bit more deep in that way than some of the fluffier musicals, you know? So I really appreciate it for that. But yes, I realize it's also kind of a meme. And then we have two of my all-time favorite musicals. Um, In the Heights. This is by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who did Hamilton. I really love In the Heights, though. And obviously, this is an actual movie, whereas the Hamilton you can watch is just the stage production. Um, I love the way that Lin flows his lyrics, and I am very partial, actually. I actually like, I don't know these songs as well as Hamilton by any means, because that was like its entire craze for everyone, including me in college. However, I would say narrative wise, I think I actually like In the Heights more, because I love the Hispanic heritage and culture in this entire musical. It just had me thinking about some of my favorite people in the world that I love so much, and being able to empathize with them better, especially because I love them so much. And it's so good. There's so much resilience, there's so much grit, there's so much determination that all of these immigrants have had from so many different places, from so many different places. And it just represents so well. I loved it so much. And then we have probably my favorite musical, which is La La Land. I own my own yellow dress, and it makes me very happy. La La Land is something that's so real that some people don't like it in the way that it ends, because it's not the escapism that you're looking for, which is ironic because it's called La La Land. But I think it handles the reality of relationships so well in a way that Hollywood usually doesn't. So for that, I think it's beautiful in the way that it's like breaking its own rules, ironically, as a movie and as a musical. Um, so I really, really like what it is, and I really like that it's intentionally going against the grain of the type of media and art form that it is. That in and of itself, I just think is really smart, and it's a joy to watch. Okay, and then moving into all my other non-musical all-time favorites, we have a war movie, which I never expected to be an all-time favorite, but this one has so much less to do about violence and so much more to do about mental health and emotional health. So of course I love it. And that is Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan. I've watched at least Memento. He always does interesting things with his movies. He likes to do a lot of experimentalism, which is fascinating. And this one experiments with like timelines and moving between various timelines. Um, I originally watched this because Harry Styles was like a secondary, tertiary character, depending on what you think, in this movie. But genuinely just ended up loving the themes in this movie. There's very little dialogue, but it speaks so much. There's so much here, despite the lack of words. And there's so many emotions encapsulated. I love it so much. I love it so much. It gave me a new empathetic lens for war that I'd never had before because it just felt like this violent, inaccessible thing. But as soon as you bring in more emotions, it took me there, and I just have way more empathy now. A lot of people love this movie for good reason, and that is Little Women, the 2019 version with Saoirse Ronan and Emma Watson. And this one still boggles my mind. I did not care for the book at all, but I love the movie. I think maybe I'm just not a huge fan of Louisa May Alcott's writing, but I love the sisters and I love anything about siblings, and I love that this is also like the most magical piece of more historical fiction that I've ever read. Um, it has the magic feeling once more, but in a completely different genre, and it just makes me so happy. This is the most recent movie that most people loved, and that is Barbie. I loved Barbie, and I loved it even more because I went and watched it with my mom, and we cried together. Um, to me, it just has everything to do with being a girl and being a woman and what that means. I think a lot of people take it in a lot more shallow of a perspective than it is and just thinks, oh, it's just trying to be feminist. Oh, it's just trying to be progressive. But to me, I just saw like my entire life. I saw my relationship with my mom and all of the women in my life watching it. I saw all of my insecurities and struggles over my entire life, but then also all of my victories across my entire life. And it just felt like an autobiography to me, and also an ode to every single woman that I've ever loved, and to just embracing being a woman. Um, Not because I've never not liked being a woman, but I think inherently when you come into a world that's very patriarchal, sometimes it can feel like a curse in some ways because the world wasn't always built for you and isn't always built for you, especially emotionally, as someone who feels very, very deeply. And so I feel like this movie is the concept of being given all of the space that you could ever need to just exist however you need to. And it was a breath of fresh air for me. It was like someone lifted a weight off my lungs and I could finally take a huge breath I'd never been able to take before. And I just really appreciated that. This is my last childhood staple that I took from my family's collection because I need this movie in my life. School of Rock. I'm pretty sure this is where my love of music came from in terms of movies. I don't think I love rock nearly as much as I do without this movie, but it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario because it's just kind of always been in my consciousness since as long as I can remember. And some of my favorite musicians also always quote and love School of Rock. So I feel like that's why a lot of my favorite musicians are who they are, because I'm like, oh, you understand my roots. I can quote like half of this movie. I will never not be in the mood to watch this movie. It is the most fun and the most funny. And then in adulthood, this is the movie that cemented my love of music, and that is Begin Again with Keira Knightley and Mark Ruffalo. This, a lot of people don't like Keira Knightley's singing. I like all the songs. I'm not, you know, is she my favorite singer ever? No. But to me, this movie is like why I love music. It is the process of becoming a musician, of believing in a musician, of advocating for a musician. And it really also just opened my eyes to the realm of career possibilities in the music industry. And just made me really excited to be in the music industry if and when I ever got to. And I have gotten to already, and it's been one of the greatest joys of my life, honestly, because I just feel like God's wired my heart to love music. And this movie, just, if anyone wanted to ask me, like, why do you love music so much? Like, what does music mean to you? I'd be like, just please watch this. This understands me. And then my all-time two favorite movies, which I had a group of my friends last year watch with me, because when I love things, I feel the closest to people when they share in the things that I love. And so the first one is a cult classic, so not everyone will love this one, but that is Harold and Maude. It is from the 70s. I found this because both my parents loved it and kept telling me that I would love it. And if anyone knows me the most, it's my parents, so they were correct. This is my all-time favorite movie. It is a cult classic, so again, not for everyone. You have to like deadpan and dark humor especially, and you have to not be able to take anything seriously. And we live in a very serious world these days. So if you're going to take anything seriously, you're not going to like it. But if you're willing to put all seriousness in, ball it up and throw it out of the window, I think you'll like this. It's about Harold and Maude. Harold is a 20-year-old man who is not wanting to be alive and is constantly pretending to die in front of his mom, who does not care. And Maude is an 80-year-old woman who has a huge zeal for life. So it has a lot to do with mental health, has a lot to do with relationships and coming of age into adulthood, more than just like out of childhood. And really just coming into your own, making your own decisions, not being afraid to be weird. So many things that are just the values that I hold as how I want to live my life. So, of course, it's one of my favorites. And then the other one is Little Miss Sunshine. And this was, I think, one of, if not Steve Carell's first movie. It's a much more serious role than he normally plays, but it is a movie that I love so much. It centers on our girl Olive, played by Abigail Breslin, and she finds out that she gets to compete in this beauty pageant, Little Miss Sunshine, because the girl who did win, had some sort of conflict and had to drop out, and so she gets to go and compete and take her place. And this has been like her life dream. So this very eclectic family comes together on this journey to get her to this contest and to help her win. And it has a lot of its own quirky humor. And it also has a lot of emotional tension between like people's expectations of you versus who you want to be, and expectations you have toward yourself. And it's very much coming into your own as well. I feel like these two movies throughout college and adulthood, found this one in college, found this one in adulthood, together have really epitomized my journey to just embrace who I am and to be unapologetic for being who I am, that I'm not anyone else and I'm not other people's decisions and I'm not other people's opinions, and there's a reason for that, and it's okay, and I can be totally myself, and that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. So in the mess of adulthood where you can't really compare because everyone's journey is totally different, these movies have really helped me feel not afraid to be my own individual person who still loves all the people around me, but is also not any of them. I'm me. And what does embracing me mean? And so these movies have really helped me do that and will continue to help me do that the rest of my life. I'm excited to find all kinds of other movies that I love so much. A couple other movies in the past year I found that were new all-time favorites were Erin Brockovich, which has a lot to do with the environment as well. But yeah, it just has a lot to do with advocacy and lifting up voices that are less heard than yours. That's something I've always really valued with art and with writing, especially. Advocacy is just a lifelong priority of mine to help empathize with people. And then the other movie I really loved was The Truman Show with Jim Carrey, which I'm shocked I'd never seen before last year, but that is definitely like the coolest movie I've ever seen that I love just for the sake of the way that it's crafted. Like, in, you know, that corny Harry Styles quote where he's like, it's a proper movie. That's why I love The Truman Show, you know, whereas these are very personal to me. The Truman Show is like, that's just a good movie that is very entrancing, and I've never seen anything like it. And the concept was so fascinating and not like anything I'd seen before. And it was also emotional. It's also about individuality in its own way. And um, yeah, I love how movies take you into spaces where you can understand your place in the world better. They conceptualize life in different ways and relationships in different ways that you can really see yourself or see the people around you. And I don't know, I think movies are, to me, compared to shows, they're kind of a shortcut to reflect on my life. And um, I don't know, it almost feels like the more imaginative and unique a movie is, the easier of a mirror it is to see real life reflected and application. And I just find that really fascinating. Yeah, so thank you for letting me share my collection with you guys. Let me know what your favorite movies are, what some of your favorites from my very eclectic mix are, and if you have any recommendations of what I should watch next based on some of my favorite things, anything mental health or emotional focused, send it my way. So I hope you guys have a good evening. Enjoy the winter months. They can be enjoyed, and I will talk to you soon.